I moved from home about 2 years ago, but before then, I was living in an old house with my family. No one believed me until there was evidence, but my family still lives in this house. It is placed next to an old church that is abandoned, so it was pretty creepy when we first bought it. The washer and dryer were in the basement, so ultimately, I couldn't avoid it like I wanted to. It was always really creepy, even when you were down there with someone else. It just felt like eyes were burning into you. There were some odd happenings. Food disappearing. Doors would be left open that had been closed before, and clothes would go missing. There were also footsteps audible from the basement, so when I finally moved out, you can only imagine how happy I was. I need to tell you a little about the layout of the basement so that this all makes sense. There's a garage door and a normal door right next to it. The washer and dryer were opposite the door and the garage door. The stairs were right next to the doors, and there was one giant hole in the wall. My mom told me about what had been found in the hole about a month after I'd moved out. There was a pile of old clothes and cotton matted down, as though someone had been sleeping on it. There were also clothes that had been missing, empty food containers, and broken markers used as utensils. But the person grew ballsy and started taking forks, spoons, and even actual plates. We figured they were getting in through the garage door since it had been broken and didn't lock. To avoid it happening again, my stepdad boarded up the garage door. Flash forward about 2 months. My mom was about to give birth to my little brother, who's 20 years younger than me. Anyway, I was laying on the couch watching TV. My stepfather had boarded up the garage door, like I said. I then heard someone trying to yank open the garage door, very violently. I wasn't really sure what was going on at first, so naturally, I was screaming because I didn't know what else to do. I called my stepfather, and then I called the police. They searched around the house, but they never found anything. I'd also like to add that the dryer wasn't on at the time, so it definitely wasn't that. After that night, we haven't really felt the same about the house, but we haven't had too much happen since. So, to end a long story, person who was creeping around my mom's basement, I never found out who you are. Please stay away from us. First, for context, I was 22 years old when this happened. I'm a female, and this occurred during my senior year in college. During my senior year, I was following a particular politician and going to rallies and other events in my spare time. My friends and I were having a ball, and we absolutely loved being involved. One particular rally I went to was in the city. My friends and I took a train, and we really enjoyed ourselves. On the way home back to our university, I noticed a guy sitting across from us that I recognized from campus. He was pretty attractive, and I remember seeing him around, as we must have had some mutual friends. I said hi to him, and to my delight, he also recognized me. We spoke for a few minutes and discovered we were both at the very same rally. By the end of the train ride, he asked me for my phone number. I remember thinking, well, he's an attractive guy, and we have some things in common. I gave him my number, but I didn't really think much past that. About a week later, I received a text from him. He asked me if I was free that weekend, and if I would be interested in meeting up for a drink. This particular time was during a break from school, so there weren't too many people around. For whatever reason, I had chosen not to go home. In my naive mind at the time, I thought to myself, great, I have my place all to myself. I met him at our local bar. We had a few drinks, and it was pretty quiet for a Friday, as it was break time. After about an hour or two, I decided to leave. I invited him back to my place for a bottle of wine, and to hang out some more. He wound up staying the night, and then leaving in the morning. But when I woke up, for whatever reason, I had this really uneasy feeling. Nothing bad had happened per se, but I just didn't like how things had gone. I felt like he was so serious, not laughing or smiling the entire evening we spent together. Although he always had a drink in his hands, I realized he wasn't really drinking them. The entire evening, he was kind of shifty and nervous. The only way I can describe it is like he was on a mission and waiting for something. These were all red flags to me. I felt bad, but I was just not interested in this guy anymore. To my relief, he didn't text me for a while after that, and I assumed he came to the same realization that it just wasn't a good match. That is, until about 2 to 3 weeks later, when he wrote me a message telling me he had been really busy, but that he wanted to meet up that weekend and catch up with me. This particular weekend, my older sister was having a large party for her husband's birthday at their house, a few towns away. A few of my friends and I were going, and there was always a very large group of people at their parties, about 50 to 60 at least. Now let me be clear, These parties were not your typical get wasted and stay up till the cops come type of college parties. They were more of an adult type party, given my sister's husband is fairly older than us. Don't get me wrong, there was plenty of drinking going on, and they were still very fun, just more of an adult type barbecue with day drinking. My 2 girlfriends and I were going to spend the night, as I was going to drive there, but obviously we would be drinking. The party started early, at around 12 p.m. Against my better judgment, I invited him to the party, thinking it couldn't hurt. I gave him the address and time. He seemed very interested and agreed to come. The day of the party was actually a lot of fun, and my friends and I were having a blast. I must admit, though, I did have a sinking feeling. I wasn't looking forward to seeing the guy. Then, to my absolute and utter relief, I got a text from him saying he would be unable to make it. I could finally relax and enjoy the party. By about 12 a.m., everyone was exhausted from a day of full-on drinking, and the party was winding down. Most of the guests had gone home, except for my friends and I, and a few other guys, friends of my sister's husband, who were also sleeping there. Of course, my sister and her husband were there too. My sister has one guest room, which was taken, and a fully carpeted and finished basement. We had various blankets and pillows, and we were all going to sleep down there on the couches, or pretty much anywhere you could lay. As I'm about to go down to the basement and get ready for sleep, the man walks through the front door. No knocking, no text, no anything. He just confidently walked straight into the house. I don't know why, but my initial reaction was fear. I pretended to be happy to see him and gave him a small hug. I asked him why he was there, to which he never really gave me a real response. All of the lights were out, and everyone was gone. I was gesturing around and hinting to him that the party was over and that he had missed it. I felt really bad that he had made the effort and decided to speak with him for a few minutes before I went to bed. We talked, and I told him I was going to get ready for bed, and that I was really sorry he missed the party. He then says, "Yeah, that's fine." Well, this dude is just not getting the hint to leave. I leave the room and go to change out of my clothes and set myself up for bed, brush my teeth, etc. I'm just really hoping that he'll leave, but I don't hear any movement from the other room. When I come back to the living room to check and see if he's actually still there, well, he is, and he's asleep on the couch. I obviously found this strange, but just assumed it was late and that he must have been really tired. He didn't seem out of place, as there were various other people sleeping at the house as well. I went to the basement and found myself a place to sleep on the floor. About 30 minutes to an hour later, I'm lying on the floor, still awake, thinking about how weird it is that he showed up. It's pitch black, and there are a few other people sleeping there, including my friends. I hear someone in the dark slowly coming down the stairs. I see that they're holding a cell phone light to guide them. As the figure reaches the bottom of the steps, I see that it's him. Now, he's never been to this house. It's in a nice suburban area, and I immediately think that it's weird that he would randomly be walking through a house of a person he doesn't know. I pretended to be asleep as I lay there frozen. I suddenly feel a tap on my shoulder. He doesn't say a word. He's over me and trying to wake me up. I don't move and just pretend to be asleep. Meanwhile, in the dark silence, I'm listening for his footsteps to walk away. I can tell that he's hovering over me. Then, with no warning, this man takes a step back and, with his boots on, kicks me full force in the face. I'm not talking about a little tap with his foot to wake me. No, full force, boot to my face. My face goes numb. I don't know what just happened. I can feel blood running down my nose. I open my eyes and look at him, and all I can remember saying is something along the lines of, "Why did you do that?" He just stared at me blankly and didn't really say anything. He turned around and walked back up the steps. I just lay there, paralyzed in fear. My heart is beating 1,000,000 times a minute. I don't know how long it was until I mustered up the courage to get up, but eventually, I army crawl in the dark over to my friend. There was another man near her who wakes up as well, and I explain what had happened. We're all half drunk, dazed, and confused, to say the least. I can't stay in this basement. I know he left, but I was just so scared. My friend and the other guy offered to take me upstairs so I could sleep in my sister's room. I go into my sister's room and lay next to her bed on the floor. I shut the door right behind me, but unfortunately, there was no lock. I don't know how, but eventually, I finally fall asleep. At some point in the morning, I wake up to my sister leaning over me. She asks, "What happened to your face? And why the heck are you in my room?" Just as I'm about to answer her, my friend, who had helped me the night before, comes flying into the room. She then tells us that the guy is still there and he's asleep on the couch. She then runs out, and I can hear her screaming at him to get up and get out. I hear him arguing back and asking where I am. My friend then tells him that I've left, and he begins arguing that he knows my car is still there, so he knows I haven't left. I have no idea how he knew which car was mine, as he had never seen it before. He also mentioned that I hadn't taken my purse. Eventually, though, he finally leaves. After that night, he wrote me a message a few days later, as if nothing had happened, asking me to hang out yet again. I then blocked him, and after that, I never really heard from him, ever again. I actually graduated only 2 months later, and thankfully, I never even saw him on campus again. To this day, I have no idea why he kicked me in the face and how he had the balls to stay after that. I have definitely learned my lesson about giving out my phone number. I still have no idea why he kicked me in the face and what the hell was wrong with him, but I just hope I never encounter him again. When I was around 8 years old, we moved into a new house. It wasn't old, but it wasn't a fairly new built house either, maybe built around the 60s. Everyone got their own room, and this was the first time I was on my own. I thought I was a big shot. A little background. I'd like to call myself somewhat of a sensitive. Ever since I was a child, I could always feel the sense of something or someone around when no one else could. Fast forward to when I was 9. It was the first year in the house, and I could feel the presence of something in there, but I never really thought anything of it, considering it wasn't too negative. There were 3 rooms that I didn't really like being in because the energy felt somewhat dark. The basement, the bathroom, and the attic. I didn't really mind being in the basement whenever I had friends over, but whenever I was alone, I couldn't be in there for more than 5 minutes without getting the feeling like I was being watched. In the bathroom, there was a cabinet that was very deep. You could literally fit 2 grown men in there. I never understood why it was so big to begin with, but it just didn't feel right. I would often feel drawn to just go look inside and stare for a few minutes, and I would get a very uneasy feeling. The attic, on the other hand, was a different story. I never, ever opened it. I kept the door shut at all times. Something was up there, and it didn't want company. One night, I was lying in bed, and it was around 2:45 a.m. when I heard footsteps in the hallway. I assumed it was just one of my brothers coming home from a night out with friends. My bedroom door was open, so I looked to see if anyone was walking around. I stared for about what seemed like 10 minutes, and no one went by. I got scared, so I decided to wait it out. As my eyes adjusted to the dark, I thought I had seen a human-like shape in the corner of my bedroom. I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, so I just tried to turn over and go back to sleep, but I felt like I was being watched. Now, in a 9-year-old's mind, it's the boogeyman, so I quickly hopped out of my bed and tried to run into my mom's room. Her room was only 2 doors down from mine. In order to walk out of my room, you have to pass a wall that was somewhat slanted, and to do this, you have to walk sideways. As I did this, I felt 2 hands pressed down on my shoulders. I immediately froze in fear. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I was just a prisoner to my own body. Then, all of a sudden, the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and in my ear, clear as day, I heard heavy breathing, and it did not sound human. My eyes widened, and then I felt the pressure lift off of me, and I could move again. I ran so fast down the small hallway into my mother's bed. That whole night, I kept hearing someone walk back and forth in the hallway, but I absolutely refused to look through the doorway. When I tell you I didn't sleep that night, I mean I didn't sleep that entire week. The next morning I walked into the hallway and just so happened to look up. The door to the attic was wide open. I asked my mom if she was up in the attic, and she said no, and that there was no reason that it should have been open. My stomach just felt like it was in my throat. I knew whatever was in that attic was in my bedroom the night before, just watching me. I'm thankful I got up and out of bed when I did, because if I didn't, I don't want to think about what would have happened. I'm 22 years old now, and I can still remember that night, as if it were yesterday, and I still can't sleep with the lights off. So, to whoever or whatever grabbed my shoulders that night, let's never, ever, and I mean ever, meet again. My dad's job requires him to go inside people's houses. He's been in thousands of apartments and houses, so I asked him what was the weirdest or creepiest thing he's ever seen or experienced. My dad arrived early at this apartment complex around 7 a.m. because he had to go through every apartment doing some maintenance. Starting from the basement, he entered a laundry room located there. In the laundry room, there was a man, around his 50s, wearing a nice white shirt with a tie, suit pants, but no shoes. He had a green tarp in his hands. My dad thought it was kind of weird, but just ignored it since it wasn't any of his business. Later that day, he left and went to a local coffee shop to spend his break. When he came back to work, there were police cars surrounding the area. Out of curiosity, he asked one of the police officers what was going on. Turns out there had been a homicide committed. My dad then asked if what he saw was related to the crime, and boy, was it. After the police interrogation, they told him that the man without shoes had stabbed his mother to death in his bathtub, wrapped her in a tarp, and then dragged her outside. The police actually caught him dragging his dead mother in the backyard. Of course, they didn't let my dad do his job in the murderer's apartment until after a proper investigation. A week goes by, and my dad gets to go there and finish what he was doing. He felt really uncomfortable doing plumbing and other maintenance in a house where someone got brutally murdered, especially in a bathroom with a bathtub full of dried up blood. Every time I tell this story to people, it always gives me the creeps. This happened to me about a week ago. I found a summer job at our local supermarket. About 2 weeks in, I got asked to work the late night shift, 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. I accepted since I was pretty in need of money, and I never went to sleep early anyway. Everything was fine and dandy until about 3 a.m., when a shirtless, scarred-up guy came into the store. After lingering around the store for a while, he quickly came up to the counter, making intense eye contact with me. As I was about to ask him if he needed any help, he then said to me, "Don't you dare move." I couldn't really hear him at first, so I asked him if he could repeat that. At that point, he got agitated and then yelled, "Make another sound, and I'll slice you up." In a very swift motion, he vaulted over the counter, going to the alcohol section, trying to grab a bottle of whiskey. Thankfully, the owners kept a baseball bat under the counter. The moment he turned his back to me, I took the bat and swung full force at his knee. He winced in pain and tried to get up. I held the bat up again, acting like I was going to hit him once more just to see him pull out a homemade shiv of some sort. I let him get up, and the moment he did, he swung his shiv at me, widely lacerating my wrist. I pushed him back with the bat, ran out of the store, and got out. The next day, I decided to call the cops and showed them the security footage, but they haven't contacted me since. I think it's safe to say that I won't be working the late night shift again for a really long time. That was just way too creepy for me. This happened a really long time ago, so my recollection of this isn't going to be word for word, but here goes. I'm a teenager, and me and my mother live alone. We live basically in the middle of nowhere. The nearest town is a little less than an hour away, and the only things we have nearest are a gas station and a bar. I know everyone who lives near me, and we rarely ever see new people in our neck of the woods. So, just seeing someone who isn't familiar is suspicious enough. This was pretty creepy. A couple of years ago, it was the middle of the night. Me and my mother are night owls. We like to be awake during that midnight to 6 a.m. time period that most people prefer to be sleeping during. My mother was watching TV in the living room, and I was using the computer in the kitchen. The kitchen and the living room are basically connected, so I wasn't too far away from her, only a few feet. The front door leads right into the living room. It's a door with about 9 windows, so it's pretty easy to see inside. My mom looked towards the door, and she said that she saw somebody staring at her through the window. He was wearing a hood that obscured almost all of his face. My mom jumped, and she, of course, walked to the door and asked him what the heck he was doing. According to my mother, he looked pretty young, but she could barely see his face, so who really knows how old he was? The man said something along the lines of, could you please help me with my car?" in a tone that I can only describe as miserable and very off-putting. Even though it was dark out, there should have been enough light for her to see a car, but there was no car. The man was also holding his hands in his pockets pretty tight. My mother said no, but that she was sorry she couldn't help. This caused him to grip whatever it was in his pockets even tighter, so tight that it caused his arms to tremble. He stayed for a few more minutes, and then swiftly disappeared. Throughout the night, maybe 1 or 2 hours later, we thought that we had heard some slight weeping, but we didn't see anyone at any of our doors or windows. I might just be making assumptions here, but I can only assume it was a weapon that he was holding in his pockets. This was a really creepy experience, and it's safe to say he was probably going to lure my mother out of the house so he could do something sinister to her. About a year ago, There was a very small metal plate jammed between the front door strike plate and the piece that goes inside of it. I'm not really sure what it's called. We have zero idea where this metal plate came from, but the middle point stopped our doors from locking. So, I'm assuming it was put there so that somebody could get in later. These two situations are probably not related, but in hindsight, it's really made me think about him because this was deliberately placed there by somebody, and we're not really sure why. Anyway, I'm just really glad we ended up being okay and nothing bad actually happened, but it's still pretty creepy.